folks, should you be buying Chinese stocks? Today, that is the question that we are going to preface around all of these conglomerates in the Chinese market. We're going to talk about the Communist Party, the ADR market, the fact that the communism is forcing these giants to donate tons of their money to different sectors of the economy. There's a lot going on, and it's taken me a long time to absorb this information to try and avoid the sinister undertone that CNBC always has around these companies and try and focus more on people that actually come from China, how their personal experience goes there, and how they're actually investing in these companies. But first and foremost, guys, we should really take some time to start talking about the giants themselves. So in the clarity of my transparency, do the channel a favor, folks, hit that like button, because we're seeing Alibaba here trading down 26% year to date. We recently saw that little rally from that crazy huge drop off. I think that was max pain from a technical standpoint. But when we take a look at the forward valuations on these companies, guys, they are more ridiculous than the forward valuations in the middle of the pandemic. And that was the closest I've ever seen tech giants to trading this low. I mean, the forward PE on Baba is a 2. Is a 2. I mean, we know the likes of Charlie Munger, Ray Dalio have been buying into these companies, especially Ray Dalio relatively aggressively, considering he visits China like a dozen times a year. I figure some of these people have some good insights, but on the other end of the spectrum, we have people like Kathy Wood that have been drastically scaling down their portfolios in these kind of companies. Now, I don't think Kathy's 100% exited Baba, but they've definitely pulled the position back. Taking a look at something like JD.com here, folks, which actually saw a massive spike. So congrats to anyone that was trading into this selling pressure, because it's up 21% from those lows. This one also having a ridiculous forward PE of what are we sitting at here? 5. Forward PE of 5. I remember seeing these in companies like GEO Group and some of these really speculative kind of companies that I used to buy, right? Like, this is just crazy to me. Taking a look at like Tencent Holdings here, guys, also with a forward PE of 3, and their growth rates are by no means slowing down here, folks. So when I say that there's always a sinister undertone in the media when it comes to communism, I think people truly forget the true scope and the scale of China, and the fact that they are way less communist based than they were 20 or 30 years ago as they tried to globalize their logistics, shipping, and obviously every country wants foreign income. I don't think they're out to destroy the markets, but I do feel like they're in a transitional period where they're trying to strengthen their economy here, folks. And before I expand on that, the news recently has been how the Communist Party seems to be pressuring these giants into basically donating and investing into infrastructure and basic small business, farming, etc. Because I mean, things like JD and all these companies don't have anything in relation with that, but we can see how, you know, the government needs to bring up the lower half of the economy, and they're trying to avoid this big divide between these massive conglomerated tech giants and obviously the rest of their society here, folks. So I want you to listen to this article or this video that I pulled off of Yahoo, where they kind of introduced this idea, right? And I'll touch base on it in a second.
Even the long-term China growth story, and yet right now you are cautious. What will take China out of the penalty box, in your view?
Well, I'm really cautious about these U.S.-listed Chinese names. You know, Beijing has told us for years that that international investors are not allowed to invest in internet companies and telecom companies and so on and so forth. So we've created these structures, these VIEs, these U.S. listings of Cayman companies that point back to the company in China. And I just think that's a very dangerous place to be. We've been reminded by Beijing that they will crack down on some of these industries, for-profit education, now some of the data stuff that Alibaba and so on and so forth are exposed to. The China story is very strong, but U.S.-listed Chinese names is not the way to play it.
The headline is that Pinduoduo pledges $1.5 billion of its profits to Chinese farmers. And really, of course, this is showing the way that, you know, regulatory either actions, veiled threats, concern about future actions from Chinese-based companies that are listed in the U.S., Pinduoduo being one of them, that these businesses are trying to stave off the threat of regulatory actions by saying we are committed to investing, you know, in the Chinese economy.
In the Western world, I always remember a quote from Kevin O'Leary when we always see Apple donating large sums of money to charities, to small business and things of this nature. And Kevin O'Leary always prefaced that I don't think this is the job of big business. I think this is the job of individuals. So why not just give it to us in dividends and let us decide where we can be charitable? And that statement holds some resounding truth in my humble opinion. But when we're looking at a thing like a place like China, and again, I've listened to a lot of people that live there and kind of how they feel about it, but they're saying that China's a lot less communism than people think. They've kind of really leaned into the capitalistic side of society. I mean, that's how things like Baba get as big as they get, but they're recognizing the foreseeable struggles in the future. And that's something that we are honestly seeing within our own societies, right? And this is the divide between the rich and the poor, the people that get market share and continue to conglomerate it. And I know after watching many of the court cases with things like Amazon and Facebook that people thought that they may have started dividing these companies up in the US because they were too much of monopolistic sized companies. And I truly believe that these companies sit in the monopoly based set level right now. But we kind of get the disconnect between market caps because something like Apple, the largest company in the world, doesn't have the same kind of scope or impact I think something like Baba does on Chinese based economies. So what I think is happening right now is we're seeing this like ripoff of a band-aid here where China just needs to set the foundation right now to make sure their economy is going to take charge of this kind of technological revolution that's happening, and they're just seeing it more on the grounds than say somewhere like in the US. And I know that might be a bit of a stretch of an idea, but again, guys, Baba's doing like double the inventory than something like an Amazon. I mean, those are truly profoundly at scale, hard to wrap your head around, right? So I really honestly think that if you're looking to buy these companies today, guys, that you are taking on some exposed risk, but people are recognizing this is a buying opportunity of a lifetime. If you are younger in the market, because unfortunately I have not decided to buy shares back yet, I'm kind of sitting on my trigger finger here, but I do have exposure for people like my parents. And I'm honestly beginning to think that because of the volatility, because of the endless news rhetoric, that you might be sitting on these things for a few years for that value proposition to come into play, that it's not really the best investment decision for somebody that's a little bit older. Even though, again, I think the risk versus reward now is well worth weighted to be buying these at these levels. It's just a matter of when you're getting into that retirement age, it's not appropriate, I think, to be leveling down into some of these individual companies rather than buying, say, the broader index and capping that 20% return from VOO. So honestly, guys, I'm kind of flip-flopping around with the angel and devil on my shoulder here because I'm like, oh my God, guys, this could really be a potential buying opportunity of a lifetime and a legacy company that I know will not be destroyed by the Chinese Communist Party and I know will highly unlikely be delisted from the ADR market, which people get confused by because when they delist these companies, it's not like they're just disappearing. They basically just don't allow them to list on major exchanges and then they'll have to revert to being like OTC-based companies. So it's not like your shares just go poof and they're gone forever because that's kind of the sinister rhetoric that is surrounding the ADR market. I just think this news is eventually going to be baked into the value, and it already has been well baked into the value. So it's just a waiting game, being patient, and perhaps buying these dips. But I want to pass the question off to you, what you guys think about this in that comment section below. I'd love to hear about it, especially if you have any experience in China or, you know, you go visit there, because obviously I am an ignorant Westerner, and I kind of get my advice from people on YouTube that do live there and how they kind of feel about this news and rhetoric. So in light of this, stay cool, stay awesome, and I look forward to catching you tomorrow.